Welcome, people of planet Earth and all planets beyond. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Josh, and this is a breakdown of the 1987 cult classic film, The Lost Boys. This is the grandfather of sexy vampire movies. They walked so Twilight could run. Now, this breakdown's a little bit different than the breakdowns you're probably used to. Normally, you're looking for plot holes or messages in a scene, but in this breakdown, we're actually going to look at the clothing worn in the movie. Look at some of the costume design, and see if we can find and ID some of the clothing worn in this film. Now, in this opening shot, we are flying over the fictional city of Santa Carla, which is actually the real city of Santa Cruz, which is kind of important because Santa Cruz is going to come up multiple times throughout this breakdown, so pay attention. Now, as we descend here on the carousel, full of young people enjoying their night, curiously enough, there's basically just teenagers out here and some adults. Here on this innocent carousel, we meet our 4 lost boys, which also happen to be vampires, David, Paul, Marco, and Dwayne, and they are by far the best dressed in the entire film, but we'll talk more about their costumes later in the video. Now, here we see our first identifiable piece of clothing. One of the surf Nazi's girlfriends is wearing a Levi's denim jacket, or at least it was a jacket till she cut the sleeves off. Now it's just like a shirt jacket, but that was a look for the times. This one appears to be a standard Levi's Type 3 jacket, most likely a 70506 for the model number, which is a very common model in the mid-80s. Then, after the scuffle between the surf Nazis and the vampires gets broken up, yes, that is actually what's happening here in this film, we see this t-shirt right here. This is a t-shirt from the movie A Clockwork Orange. It says ultraviolence. A Clockwork Orange, and the term ultraviolence was used by lots of punks and skinheads into the 80s, and clearly the costume designer was trying to paint these guys in that light, and if you've ever seen A Clockwork Orange, you know what I mean. We also see this guy wearing this Mexican blanket poncho drug rug, which was a pretty common sight in coastal California at the time. Now, as our 2 protagonists enter Santa Carla for the first time, we get the People Are Strange montage. And in this montage, we have a mixture of like lost and bored gutter punks mixed with like carefree summer days teenager, which is definitely an intentional move by Joel Schumacher and Susan Becker, the costume designer. Susan Becker, the costume designer for The Lost Boys, actually told us that for all these shots, they costumed every single one of them and made sure they were designed specifically to communicate the sort of homeless lost boys in a towny coastal town feel that they were trying to go for. Here we have a couple skate punks. One is wearing what I think is actually a Levi's denim jacket that's been heavily modified. We also see here a Santa Cruz skateboards slasher skateboard. Obviously, remember, we're in Santa Cruz. We're going to see that Santa Cruz reference a lot. Obviously, it was popular at the time, but I also think it's pretty interesting. There's sort of subtle hints as to where they are. Couple more gutter punks sitting here by the curb. Can't really identify much more of their outfits, but we can identify those sneakers, and those are Converse All-Stars. I remember as a punk kid, all I wanted in the world were Converse All-Stars, even into the 2000s. Here's another piece we can identify. This is an IOU denim sweatshirt. IOU denim was one of these fashion brands that basically built a business on being able to import from other countries before importing was as big a deal in the 90s. And they didn't last particularly long. Late 80s into early 90s at most, as far as I can tell. Now, here's one of my favorite t-shirts in the entire film, and that's this Ed Roth Ratfink. Ratfink was born out of the mind of Ed Roth, a highly influential artist from coastal California who did lots of art pertaining to hot rods and random weird monsters, kind of grimy. Definitely has a sort of punk vibe for sure. But his t-shirts were incredibly popular through the 60s into the 70s and the 80s. He had a shop in coastal California, did lots of airbrushes, and had lots of t-shirts that were printed over the years. In fact, you could buy his designs from like magazines and such and actually screen print them or heat transfer them onto your own t-shirts. So in my opinion, this is a perfect choice for a t-shirt for some random guy at a gas station to be wearing in coastal California. Now, this may be the most famous Ratfink design, but there are many more. Now, if you're interested in other Ratfink t-shirts, you should check out our sponsor, Defunct.com's archive of vintage t-shirts, where we found this exact t-shirt design. They're the sponsor of this video, and if you are ever interested in learning more about vintage t-shirts and all of vintage t-shirt culture, they are the place to go. And so go check out their archive where we found this design and many more. Now here we catch a glance of Sam's sneakers. They are the 1980s Converse Weapon sneakers. We often think of Converse, we think of the, Chuck Taylor All-Stars. But in the 80s, Converse was making sports sneakers, basketball sneakers, and all kinds of other sneakers to compete with the likes of Nike, Adidas, and Reebok. They have obviously since not been in that market specifically, but in the 80s they certainly were. These were definitely sneakers that you would want to be seen wearing. We also see Sam wearing this oversized, like pinkish collared shirt. I don't have a specific ID for this exact shirt, but we're going to talk more about Sam's style later on in the film. Here we've got young Punk sporting the GBH, a classic UK punk band, on his leather jacket, which seems a little bit big for him. Notice here we have some airbrush t-shirt artists. Airbrush t-shirts were very popular in the 70s and the 80s. Obviously, I think we've moved past that by now, but again, these were really common back then. This was a really important part of like coastal California culture. Now here in this car, we can actually see this guy's wearing a Def Leppard Pyromania from 1983. Looks like he may have his sleeves cut off, maybe not, but definitely a popular band at the time, and this t-shirt is still super cool. Now it's Friday night at the beach, and we have a concert led by Tina Turner's saxophone player, ironically, in really tight purple spandex pants. This song actually bops, in my opinion. This is dope. There's an original version. This is better than the original version. But here in the crowd, we can actually point out at least one t-shirt out of all this. We can see a Journey t-shirt this lady's wearing right here. It's hard to see, but it is there. Another t-shirt we can see and identify in the crowd is this Bel Ray t-shirt, which apparently is like a motocross or motorcycle racing team or parts company. Now, as Star is retreating into the crowd, we can see this guy right here wearing a Rip Curl t-shirt. Rip Curl was one of those brands out of Australia that was really big in the surfer communities in California at the time. Also want to point out this extra right here. This guy's giving me main character vibes. I think he looks right at the camera, which you're not supposed to do as an extra. But he definitely looks cool. He definitely looks the part. Then we have another guy right behind him who also looks right at the camera for a split second, wearing this Santa Cruz hoodie. Interesting about the Santa Cruz hoodie, this is like their alternate logo. Again, I told you guys we're gonna see Santa Cruz references all through, partly because it's it's skateboard era, but also we are technically in Santa Cruz. But you don't see this logo very often, at least not on garments. And this particular item, we have not actually been able to locate a live version of it, so it's still out there somewhere. Now, notice here in the crowd, it's kind of blurry, but you can definitely see it. We have a Levi's Jackron patch. Clearly, this lady is wearing some form of Levi's. My guess it's possible, at least, that she's wearing like a 512, which would have been like a tapered, slim fit, high-rise jean. Now, here let's talk a little bit about Sam's style. Clearly this guy loves his colors, his vibrancy, a very 80s thing to be wearing. He's clearly at least a little bit influenced by the Memphis art group. And Memphis style art, which was emphasizing colors and shapes and sort of an optimistic emotional feel versus like functionality, was a staple and sort of like the quintessence of the 80s. But we see a lot of Sam's garments looking that way, definitely having the colors, sort of the squiggles, and some of the art styles in his clothing. And curiously enough, the Memphis Milano group actually produced shirts, like collared shirts just like this, that you can buy. Here are a couple examples. I don't know if this shirt is a Memphis Milano. I haven't found the exact copy, but it's certainly influenced by him. Then we meet the notorious Frog Brothers. Corey Feldman here wearing the Why Waltz When You Can Rock and Roll M16 t-shirt with the red flannel. And Alan sporting the U.S. Army coveralls, which is actually kind of interesting because let's take a look here at this patch. This patch was from the 11th Army Corps, activated in the 1940s during World War II. And it was disbanded by the end of World War II. So is this a World War II era coverall? I don't know, but certainly the patch is from that era. Then we see Laddie, the youngest half vampire, wearing this like Victorian era bellhop jacket, which the costume designer Susan Becker actually told us was an actual antique period piece. It wasn't a repro, it was actually from that era, from the Victorian era. So that's pretty cool.
Also, this innocent bystander wearing a blazer, but underneath the blazer, we still have a cool band t-shirt from The Who. Then, as Sam is entering the Frog Brothers comic book store, we see this guy in the background wearing this mysterious t-shirt. This is actually Joe Ferreira, the owner of Atlantis Fantasy World, which is the actual real-life comic book shop that this scene was filmed in. Here he is as an extra wearing this shirt that we cannot identify. In fact, I contacted Joe and see if he could remember, but he could not. He could remember that he was wearing another shirt on the set, and that is this shirt right here. This is a Mage t-shirt made by the company Graffiti. Mage was a comic book character that he was fond of, but we cannot identify this actual t-shirt he's wearing in the actual scene. So, if you know what this is, or if you've got any idea, leave it in the comments below. We would really like to figure this one out. Then we have Alan Frog in this Airborne Mess with the Best, Die Like the Rest t-shirt, definitely in line with his character. Then we see Sam wearing this shirt. Very Sam, very loud, very bold. This is a Colorado sort of all-over print made by Mallory and crew. In fact, look, I'm wearing it. This is not the screen-worn shirt, but it is a version of it that was mass-produced at the time. Very hard to find, but how do you think it looks? And then in another sort of blink and you'll miss it moment, we have this Santa Cruz t-shirt right here. This is a classic Santa Cruz skateboard t-shirt that you would have seen commonly in the area. Now here in the vampire lair where the Lost Boys vampires are trying to get Michael to become one of them, we see this sort of shrine for Jim Morrison here. And Jim Morrison is actually really important to the style of this film. Joel Schumacher was a big fan and loved Jim Morrison's style. And so he and Susan Becker, the costume designer, used Jim Morrison as a sort of style influence for not only the whole film, but the wardrobe. Now here we can see all of the vampires wearing their individual outfits. Susan wanted each one of these to sort of reflect the personality of each vampire. So she actually worked with each one of them to design their own costumes. Susan actually told us they had to produce like 6 each for each costume because some of them had to be designed specifically with stunts in mind. So while there are several versions of each of these costumes out there, you will not believe what some of these have sold for. So stick around to the end of the video where we reveal the astronomical prices paid for these Lost Boys costumes. Now back to Sam for a moment. He is just reading in bed, scared for his life. We can see this shirt he's wearing right here is another Rip Curl shirt. Again, it's very loud and in your face, but that was the times, and that's clearly Sam's style. Now, after Michael makes it back from his all-night vampire binge, we see him laying on his bed. I want to point out the jeans that he's wearing. I believe these are Levi's 501s. They are certainly Levi's. We've seen that in other scenes, but I do believe they are 501s based on the way the crotch sort of folds. The button flies were tended to have that sort of fold versus the 505, which had a zipper. I'm not sure what kind of sneakers he's wearing, so if you know, let us know in the comments. So here's another shirt worn by Sam that has given me absolute fits. I actually talked to Susan Becker, the costume designer, and she actually doesn't remember what it was either. So I want to ask and see if you can help me identify this shirt. There's obviously cartoon characters all over this shirt. There is a word in red. Now the best I can tell, the red word here looks like ACTT with the number 3 at the end, which I'm pretty confident is there. I don't know what these characters are or what they're from. If you know, please let me know in the comments below. Now Sam is calling the Frog Brothers about his half-vampire brother, and Alan Frog is wearing this shirt right here, which I believe is an Uzi t-shirt. The Uzi was a very common and popular gun in 80s action films, so it's no surprise Alan Frog might be sporting the t-shirt. So here underneath all of the garlic, we see Sam wearing a Born to Shop t-shirt. Apparently, Sam and his family were originally from Phoenix, which is incredibly hot outside, so the mall is the most popular and common thing to do, most likely in the 1980s. Now here in this scene, Michael is brought out to the beach to become a full vampire by committing his first kill, and of course, the Lost Boy vampires are back at it again, attacking the surf Nazis. But in the midst of all of this chaos, we can actually see a t-shirt that we haven't seen before. Now it's obviously hard to see in this darkness, but here on the back of this t-shirt, you can see what appears to be a skateboarder. This t-shirt is actually a t-shirt design that was sold by the Trans World Skateboard magazine at the time.
But this one I think is a little bit different from the standard design. This one on the front side has some wording that does not necessarily seem to spell out skateboard or transworld, but has a date that says 1987. The design on the back is clearly a transworld design, but I'm wondering if this t-shirt specifically is not their generic one that they sold in the magazine, but actually a t-shirt that was produced for a particular event. Now the Frog Brothers arrive to help Sam and Michael rescue, star, and kill the vampires. Alan Frog is wearing another cool t-shirt here. This one says Mac Dog. I'm not sure what else it says, but it's certainly inspired by the military t-shirts that he is often wearing. A lot of these t-shirts could be found at military surplus stores at the time, or specifically sold for veterans. Now here we get a good look at Michael's sunglasses. These are often misreported as Ray-Ban Clubmasters, but these are actually the Cortland Santa Cruz Clubmen. Again, there's a Santa Cruz reference. Lots of Santa Cruz references. Cortland was a much smaller frames designer in the 80s and is still around today. Now, as Marco the Vampire is about to get a stake through the heart, let's talk about his jacket. Clearly, the punk influences are very evident here. This jacket was built by Susan Becker on a Levi's 506 black denim jacket frame. And take a look at the back, which you don't often see, actually has a Princess Leia sort of motif here on the back. Obviously, the punk logos and patches and different threads and materials abound on this jacket. I think this is one of the coolest jackets maybe I've ever seen, to be completely honest. In terms of design, absolutely super cool. You could definitely see any celebrity rocking one of these jackets today. Now, as Paul the Vampire is about to get eliminated via a garlic bath, let's talk about his outfit. Here it appears he's wearing a bleached out Levi's 501. Levi's were the common frame by which a lot of these costumes were built. This costume is built on a tuxedo jacket. It's got safety pins on one side and other metal trinkets on the other. Also, you can see right here the earring that he's wearing. It's got a skull and a dagger. This one was actually sold at auction, and it sold for $3,125. Then the next vampire death goes to Dwayne, wearing this motorcycle jacket with the leopard painted on the side of the arm. This one is a super cool jacket. Not sure who the manufacturer of the jacket is, but I love the painting on this. When I was a punk kid as a teenager, I just loved painting on leather jackets. I just thought it had such a cool patina after it wears over time. This one is definitely one of the cooler ones. Inside of it was inscribed by Corey Haim the famous line, "Death by Stereo." That is a really cool touch to this particular jacket. Now, I haven't revealed the auction price for these jackets, and that's because they all sold at a lot. And that means we have one more to cover. And that is Kiefer Sutherland's character, David the Vampire. David's costume was built on a cloth craft by Joseph and Feist trench coat, most likely because they would need multiple versions of these jackets for all of the stunts. So they got something they could get right off the rack instead of custom building absolutely everything. So conceivably, you could actually find this actual jacket frame out there in the world. David's jacket had lots of little trinkets on it, like watches and random buttons. And curiously enough, on the production tag that would be used to later catalog and archive these costumes was the production number 666. Now for the big reveal. Some of these jackets have been sold individually for like $5,000 to $15,000. But all these jackets were put into one collection and sold as one lot in 2022. And the winning bid was $118,750 to own these pieces of cinema history. So with The Lost Boys in the books, let us know in the comments below which movie we should look at next. We thank you to our sponsor, Defunct.com, for sponsoring this video, and we thank you so much for watching. See you later.